connecting security solutions with security leaders. Security you should know starts now.
Welcome to Security You Should Know. I'm your host, Rich Straffolino. Today, we're talking with Zero Networks and what they're doing in zero trust architecture. Now, the problem they're addressing, it is a big one in the age of ransomware. Kind of an age-old problem here is that lateral movement across your network is still a nightmare for most organizations. Helping us find out why this is such a continuing problem are Sean Marion, the VP and CSO over at Excel Energy, and Doug Mayer, VP and CISO at WCG. So Sean, let me start with you. Why is lateral movement still such a problem? We've known about it for forever. Why are we still struggling with it?
Complexity. I mean, it comes down to sheer complexity. You go across all of our environments, especially these aging environments, it's just too complicated to separate those things. At least traditionally it has been, without breaking things. And when you're going to go to the business and weigh out the security risk with the business risk, a lot of the times the business is going to win, especially when it comes to impacting operations. So complexity, I would say, is the key word.
Doug, what about for you? Is Sean right on here with complexity, or are there other issues that are keeping this a persistent issue for us?
No, I agree with the complexity. As you start adding other clouds and go into a hybrid cloud environment, that complexity builds up. Again, like Sean said, if you're dealing with legacy environments, you have to deal with complexity. And I think that's where lateral movement does become a problem.
All right, well, today we're going to be talking with Benny Lakunishak, the CEO at Zero Networks. We are thrilled to have him on the show. Now, Benny, to start out, we need to answer some essential questions here. How do I explain the value of your solution to my CEO? What does your solution do? What does it not do? And what is the pricing model? Can you help us out, set the table here?
Sure. So real quick, we give you business resilience, which is the opposite of lateral movement, because nothing can move in your environment. We do not break your environment. That's what we do not give you. Or we do not burden you with a lot of manual work and labor that microsegmentation has historically and the legacy providers have been known for, which is again coming to what Sean and Doug, what they said. In terms of the pricing model, it's a fairly simple subscription model based on assets. Per asset you segment, you pay, and depending on the asset type, the license is a bit more expensive or less. And of course, the bigger the organization, the less you pay per asset. That's the licensing model.
All right. So we have the preliminaries here. We know why we're still having this problem. We've kind of gotten just a little taste of what Zero Networks is up to, but I'm sure you both have a lot of questions. So Doug, let me come to you first here. What other questions do you have about Zero Networks?
I'd like to understand more about how they're handling the MFA and the privilege access management. How do you adapt that to something you have existing?
So first, just to understand, our microsegmentation essentially puts a network bubble around every asset you want, every client, server, OT, IoT, cloud, Kubernetes, whatever asset type you want, we can segment and put a default inbound block in front of it. One of the features in that segmentation is to have certain ports, kind of like TCP 2.2, so SSH or RDP or any other privileged port, to have that always closed across the estate. And because we see both processes and users and identities, we know who is trying to connect that we now blocked on those ports. And then we can push MFA with any identity provider you want. If you approve, we'll open that port only for you. So we kind of bring, if you will, MFA to TCP IP. To any TCP IP connection you want is now MFA-able. So all of the legacy stuff you mentioned, or anything really, can get MFA'd.
Sean, how about you? What other questions do you have about Zero Networks?
Yes, maybe I'll go back with the problem statement, or at least mine. I know there's multiple problems here when it comes to lateral movement, but if we talk about complexity, the complexity of deploying this, so you talk about identities, you can put a bubble around an asset, IT, OT, all of that. How do you roll that out at scale and not make this a massive science project?
Right. So great question. One of the CTOs, one of the largest airlines in the US, actually said after 15 minutes of deploying, that's it. So it's a virtual appliance or appliances you deploy. They are stateless. They know how to, in an agentless way, remotely connect to any asset type you want. Again, Windows, Linux, Mac, Kubernetes, PaaS, whatever. and manage them through APIs. Each API is different, and use the controls already there. Kind of think about that living off the land defense that we orchestrate. So we use the Windows firewall, the Linux firewall, the Mac firewall, the NSG on the path, the CNI on the Kubernetes cluster, whatever is there, we know how to manipulate with APIs, kind of like a hacker, but in a safe, secure way, and use that control to give us the visibility and the control. On top of that, that's kind of the mechanism or the physics of how we do it. We have automation. Without any AI bullshit, you can click in the UI and say, these assets, whatever they are, I want to segment them. We put them in 1 month by default, 1 month of learning. We understand deterministically what's going on and what should be open, and we automate the policy creation. We had one customer that segmented 15,000, that's 15,000 assets in 1 month, 1 click, without any human intervention.
Maybe a follow-on question on that if I can. So when you talk about you can, determine based on identities. So how do you know that Benny cannot access this host on port 22, but Doug can? Is that just through learning and seeing behaviors?
So first of all, for the privileged ports, we don't learn. We just say everything is revoked. There is no TCP access. I want you to prove it's you with a phone that separates you from malware, attackers, whatever, and then I'll allow you to access. So by default, these MFA policies, we call them, are just allowing any user in your IDP that you trust that has MFA. You can tighten those and say, well, actually for that group of servers, I don't want to elevate in MFA. I also want to tighten it and say only that group of users from that group of machines. And even you can say only with these processes, these source processes that they are trying to do, only then MFA.
Got it.
So let me add on to this. What happens if someone already has someone living off the land in that environment that you're learning from? Do you see that and able to help mediate your new customer?
Like you mean if you have an existing control, like a Windows firewall configured?
No, you have an existing threat.
That's the living of the land attack. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, our learning, there's a bunch of things there, but our learning does take that into account. Although most customers, you won't have any attacker there, but we do know how to sift for various both detections and just known threat indicators of don't learn that. Plus, most lateral movement tactics happen on privileged ports. Guess what? Those we kind of never open. You have to MFA. So you scratch that off also. Plus, even if we do learn, after everything I've said, we'll learn something specific that they're doing for a month, and then they will try to move away from that. That will be blocked. So they won't be able to. So generally, even if we are in a dirty environment with an attacker, most attack tactics will be cut off just with MFA, unrelated to learning. The learning is ignoring that. And then maybe we'll learn a few things, but those will be contained. You will not be able to move other than that.
So additionally, when you learn off the land, how do you handle if there's larger networks than versus smaller networks that you're segmenting? Is there a capacity challenge that you run into?
No, we get that a lot, but our architecture was built for scale. The virtual appliance I mentioned, one of those support 10,000, you add to 20,000. This just auto scales. We've scaled already to hundreds of thousands. So the architecture was built for scale. In terms of the learning itself, that's kind of the physics of how we remotely hook into things and monitor. And the automation itself, we know how to humanize rules, how to aggregate, how to group them so that we don't open, like 50 rules per machine or per server. We know how to aggregate and, this is something that's happening across. It's one rule, not a rule per machine, right? So we know how to do this in a way where, let's say, for 10,000 machines, you will have actually potentially less than 1,000 rules. So it's very manageable.
So you've done this a few times now. You've done these deployments at multiple customers. A lot of us have tried to do some degree of segmentation throughout the years. Again, it just becomes very hard. So what advice would you have for a security team or the security leaders as they look to do this, as they start? Like, what should they do to get it right?
You really have to look end to end and understand how would you operationalize this. And there's just a lot of details. And make sure that if you have a problem, focus on that problem to solve for that, because perfect is the enemy of good in many times. So don't try to be too good, let's say, right, from that perspective. Obviously, I'm biased, but with us, you can actually do more good with a lot less people and a lot less time. Like, we don't offer professional services. Like, we give you an engineer to work with and no professional services, and we can very quickly segment everything. But if you are looking at any of the legacy vendors in the space, make sure you really understand what you want to do here. Try to minimize it, because the amount of work is just enormous, and that will multiply later on as well. That's why we've built the automation to alleviate all of that.
Yeah. So maybe building off of that. So when I think on the OT side, which can be a bit more just different, right? Challenging, not always, but different for sure.
Yeah.
So are you guys protecting access to that environment, or actually, I mean, I'm sure you do that as far as access to the firewall, let's say that it's segmented off to some degree or whatever the case is. But once we get onto that network, you're talking, a lot of these devices communicate in different protocols. So how do you guys manage that? Is it just protecting access to, let's say it's some kind of OT environment, or do you get even deeper into the OT environment to control access?
We go deeper into the OT environment. We know how to integrate with switches and routers and put ACLs there, essentially on any switch and routers you'll bring to us. And by the way, we supported a lot of the major vendors, and I said, but we also have this. So we will add support to put an ACL programmatically on that switch and router, as long as it supports it, to be able to segment those off individually and to segment things within the OT environment as well. Yeah.
So let me pivot a little bit. With AI capabilities coming and segmentation being really important for AI guardrails, how do you see you fitting into that area where an organization might be leveraging the cloud more for AI capabilities? How do you see you fit in there?
So just to make sure I understand the question, when you say leverage the cloud for AI more, you mean SaaS native AI applications like a ChatGPT or a Claude?
No, I mean like Azure, using Azure data in the center type of situations. How do you find yourself segmenting that environment?
Well,
to make companies more AI capable, you could say?
I don't know if we make them more AI capable. That's up to them. But what we do in a hybrid situation, let's say you have something on-prem, something cloud, or multiple clouds even, we don't care. We segment whatever it is so that you have one UI to see all of your assets in Azure, in AWS, in GCP, in Oracle, in on-prem, and you see the connections between them in one place, in one view, and also the rules that dictate who can connect where from a networking perspective in one place. And also the automation does it across everything, right? So you have one place to segment and see all of your networking, right? Network control, network security, if you will, in one place. Now that you have this much more tight environment, your micro-segmented environment, regardless of how many fragments or pieces or cloud and on-prem it is, now you're in a place where you can enable more things, whether you want to innovate with AI or other things. That's just, you can do that. You can also do that without, but you're at more risk, let's say.
So I get the sense that it's more getting the basics in place so you can move into that AI capability and that make that segment specific to that.
Yes.
Okay.
From that perspective, segmenting it makes it easier. Yeah.
I remember the day we had these on our walls. We had these big plotted, printed network diagrams, and but now it's gotten to the point now you couldn't get it on. I mean, you'd take up a whole building to get them up there. And so I'm curious. So is it you're just scanning the entire environment, looking for everything, classifying that as far as like this is a Windows device, this is that, or do we need to provide you with data ahead of time, or is it a mix of the both to kind of get a good picture of the environment?
By default, we don't need anything. We'll just hook into your asset repositories, your Azure AD, classical Active Directory. We'll hook into where all of your assets exist, okay? Intune, whatever. Ansible, Jump, right? Like more asset repositories that we support. We have more. See all of the assets and then get the permission to connect to them and understand what are they doing? What are the running processes? What type of connections? Just without scanning. We don't scan really. We just connect to stuff and get the metadata of all of the connections live, by the way, agentless, in real time without being inline. So we don't need any of that. Now, if you want our rule engine, the automation, to be automating not in a generic way, but in a way that says you understand your environments and apps. Let's say you have that in your CMDB, whatever it is. And if we sync with your CMDB, we automatically create labels, automatically create rules based on your labels, based on your application environment. So the automation engine knows how to adapt if you sync your CMDB. When you in a click, you set it up with us, essentially.
All right. Well, Benny, lots of great questions. Thank you so much for all of your answers. But is there one thing that we didn't ask about that we need to know?
One question we get a lot, or not question, I would say comment, that this is too good to be true. This is what I keep hearing, like we literally have a slide deck on that. And I would say, yes, I heard Sean laughing because that's what he probably felt in his head. And I kind of, Benny can read my mind, So yeah, I encourage everyone that's thinking the same, that wants to get serious about stopping lateral movement for good, to go to our website, zeronetworks.com, go to the middle of the homepage. You don't need to scroll much. See 10 videos of customers that went on the mic and said, I didn't believe it, and I've segmented my entire environment in like a few clicks. That's what I encourage you to do, and would love to potentially help anyone that needs to solve for that.
Well, that's just about it for this episode of Security You Should Know. Like Benny said, to learn more, head on over to zeronetworks.com. And if you have any feedback for this show or for our panelists, feedback at cisoseries.com. A huge thanks to Sean and Doug for helping us learn more about what Zero Networks is doing, digging into all of the important details. And thank you, Benny, for being game and for your time to answer all of these questions. And thank you for listening to Security You Should Know.
That wraps up another episode of Security You Should Know. If you like this program, please subscribe, tell your friends, and leave us a review. All companies showcased on this program are sponsors of CISO Series. If your company would like to be spotlighted and interviewed by our security leaders, go to our contact page on cisoseries.com or just email us at info@cisoseries.com. Thank you for listening to Security You Should Know, connecting security solutions with security leaders.